Welcome to the Niche Pursuits Podcast. Are you ready to discover some niche business ideas that actually work? Well, it's time for a motivational kick to jumpstart your next big idea. Here's your host, Spencer Haas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Haas from nichepursuits.com. And today I'm excited to bring you a new interview that I just recently did with Brian Dean from Backlinko.com. Now, what's awesome about this interview is that Brian has been a longtime reader of nichepursuits.com, and he actually started out building small niche websites, and he did that for a couple of years. But as you'll hear in the interview, as Google came out with their updates, Panda and Penguin, he could clearly see that those small niche websites were not performing quite as well, and so he evolved and he started moving towards more white hat link building techniques, and he's had a lot of success with that. He had one very successful site. He also did a lot of client work and saw success for those clients. And so he created Backlinko.com as a resource for people looking for those type of link building and more white hat strategies and marketing tactics that he could teach. So now Brian has focused 100% of his time just on Backlinko.com and sharing those strategies and building his audience. And he's done a tremendous job in building a huge audience. You can see the growth of his blog. He's now become a well-known marketing expert, and so I'm very excited to have him on the Niche Pursuits podcast. He shares a lot of great tips here, not just for blogging and link building, but for business in general. So hopefully you can pick up quite a few things here. So let's go ahead and listen to the interview. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. Today I've got a great guest with us, Brian Dean from Backlinko.com. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Spencer. Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I have followed Backlinko for a little while now. Your blog has just exploded. It seems like you're everywhere. People are referencing your material. You've had quite a bit of success lately. And we want to dig into, how you've done that and strategies that people can apply in their own business. But before we dig into that, we want to know your history just a little bit. What were you doing before you ever started Backlinko.com?
So before I started Backlinko, I was basically a struggling affiliate marketer. to not go too way back, but basically I was freelance writing, and on the side, I was creating niche sites. And these were kind of before – this is actually before Niche Pursuits even came out. So these were the type of one-page niche sites that, you'd search for a keyword that was some product keyword. It was an exact match domain. You'd click on it and you'd be like, ugh, one of these. And you monetize with AdSense. And at one point, I created 175 of these one-page sites.
Yeah. At
my peak or at the bottom, depending on how you want to look at it. So that was kind of where I was at in terms of building my empire. Was I was freelance writing on the side. I just knew I could crack this SEO thing. It just seemed like something people could figure out. I was spending a lot of time on places like the Warrior Forum. Probably the wrong crowd, but at the time, it was pretty easy to rank. I mean, these pages, as much as they didn't make a whole lot of money, they did rank for the keywords that I was targeting very, very easily. And then one day Panda came out and completely wiped them out. And it went from that to these 5-page niche sites, which were, bump up in quality, I guess, but not really. And then Penguin wiped those out. And right after Penguin, I put the pieces together. And that update for me was a huge message from Google. And I saw the writing on the wall that this whole kind of not niche site thing, but if you create these niche sites that, not to get into the semantics of what a niche site is, but if you create a site that doesn't provide any value, basically, it's not going to rank anymore. It's just no two ways about it. And so I created a kind of like a niche authority site after that was actually really good. It was something that provided value to people, it helped people, and I promoted it using white hat strategies for the first time. And I kind of got introduced to white hat strategies from working with clients. So I was doing freelance writing, also took on some SEO clients at that point, and they didn't, obviously they weren't pumped when you send them a bunch of build my rank links. at the end of the month, saying this is the work I did this month, or I bought a link package from the Warrior Forum that you could have bought for $25, and I'm charging $1,200 a month. So I was doing some white hat for these clients, and I was getting results, and I was like, wow, this white hat thing is actually, there's something to this whole crazy white hat thing that people are talking about. So I created this site, used pretty white hat stuff, also some gray hat in there, but predominantly white hat, and it did great. It went from a blank WordPress installation to a $10,000 a month earner in 3 months.
Wow.
Because at that point, it's a little bit different than today. It sounds really impressive, and I guess in a way it is, but the crazy thing is that after Penguin, it was wide open in terms of SEO. No one knew what to do. Even so-called experts were like, me. I had no idea people didn't know what they were doing. So I was able to put the pieces together a step ahead of everyone else, and I could just rank. It was almost like Google's first page for all my keywords were blank, and I could just rank for immediately on the first page because the competition just didn't know what they were doing with SEO yet. And then after that, I was kind of, this white hat thing is cool. Where can I find more information? And I had trouble finding blogs that covered really actionable white hat stuff. So I basically created the blog that I wanted to read, and that's when I started Backlinko.
So would you say you're actually grateful that Google came out with all their updates?
Absolutely. It sounds crazy to say, but I would still be struggling if the Penguin update in particular really, really was helpful for me.
Yeah, I see a lot of myself in your story as well. I mean, that's where I started, is building out lots of either 1-page or 5-page niche sites. And I've sort of upped my game slowly along the process. It sounds like maybe you flipped the switch, if you will, over to white hat completely, maybe a little sooner than I did. But I think for a lot of us that were in that game, we've all made that similar decision now, that if you still want to get traffic from Google, you have to change the way you're doing business away from just, really call it what it is, spammy, low-quality sites, to now actually providing high quality and promoting it in a way that attracts quality links. So, like I said in the beginning, you started Backlinko.com. It's had tremendous growth over the past year or so. I pulled it up on SEMrush.com to see kind of the traffic growth of Backlinko, and it's been significant. You're getting a great amount of traffic right now. Why do you think that the traffic to your blog has grown so quickly?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think there's kind of 3 things that have helped me and can help other blogs that are looking to get a lot more traffic, because this is the second year that I started Backlinko. And I feel like there's a lot of great information out there about people who are just getting started with their blog. But I think there's not a lot of good help for how to get that kind of second year bump, how to take it from like a mid-tier blog to like a higher, like a niche pursuits, a smart passive income level of blog. So there's 3 things I did over the last year that made a huge difference. One was that I focused on publishing case studies. And basically that's just an old-fashioned zig when they zag, go where they ain't marketing plan. No one's publishing case studies, so I publish case studies. Basically, everyone in White Hat SEO, the White Hat SEO blogs, we're just talking about just publish great content. That's all you need to do. And I noticed from the comments that people, that wasn't resonating with people, because people were going and trying it. You read online that all you need to do is keep your site updated regularly with great content, and you get traffic. And that sounds nice in theory, and it sounds nice at a conference or in a blog post, but in real life it doesn't work. So I realized that there was an underserved community. And I kind of felt that out during the first year. I was still kind of figuring out this whole blogging thing. This other site I started that I spoke of before was sort of a blog, but it wasn't like me and my personal brand and all these other kind of tiny things that add up to a ton of things you need to learn to have a successful blog. But over the last year, I kind of figured that out. So I decided to ramp that up. And I was like, if this is working, let's do more of that. So I feel like part of the strategy was to kind of go where they ain't and do a little bit zig when they zag. So that was one thing that I think can apply to any blog. Kind of look at your niche, what people are doing, and even if they're having success with it, try to think of what would happen if you did the opposite. Sometimes it wouldn't make any sense and it wouldn't work, but a lot of times it would, and it's definitely helped for me. The other thing I did was I stopped publishing as often. So the first year, I really focused on publishing good stuff, but making sure I also updated all the time, because I had read from so-called blogging experts that this was really important. And as you can see with my SEMrush data, this year I published maybe 11 times. And the traffic has increased quite a bit. So it's really a total quality over quantity game. And I've just kind of cranked it up to the absolute extreme by only publishing once a month or sometimes once every 6 weeks. So I'd also focus on that, going this quality over quantity. And the third thing I did was I hustled really hard to promote everything that I published. So I never just publish and prayed and just publish and hope something did well, or use the spaghetti cannon approach and publish a bunch of things and hoping something sticks. I was pretty strategic this year after having 1 year under my belt of experience about kind of what works and what doesn't. And I tried to, as my friend Noah Kagan says, double down on what works. Mm-hmm. Those are the three things that work, so I doubled down on them this year.
Yeah, no, that's great. Some great tips, and I want to dig deeper into each of those 3 points as we go along here. But to kind of transition, to make the transition complete from what we were talking about, you were doing niche sites, and you did build one larger site that did quite well. Now you've moved on to Backlinko. Are you still working on anything else? Do you still have that previous site, or are you focusing just 100% on Backlinko now?
I'm focusing 100% on Backlinko. So the other site is just sort of sitting there and not doing anything. And I have another niche site that I created after that one that's also doing okay, but I just haven't worked on. I haven't even updated WordPress, just to give you perspective. Like they're probably WordPress 3.0. So I've really been just zeroing in on Backlinko because I realize that's where the opportunity is, and it's a lot more fun. I think that the thing about White Hat that doesn't get talked about that much is that White Hat is a lot more fun and rewarding than doing Black Hat stuff. With Black Hat stuff, you're always worrying about like whether you're logged into Chrome, if Google's going to find it, and you know what I mean? With White Hat, it's just like easy peasy. You just feel like it's just so much more relaxing. You don't have those sleepless nights worrying about updates, and it's just more fun, man. So I've just been gravitating towards doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's good to know, and I could probably take some of that advice from you as far as 100% focus on something. I know you read my blog, and for my listeners out there, they know I usually have several projects going on, whether that's a new authority site that I'm working on or a niche site case study. And of course, I have my software, Longtail Pro. So I'm sort of stretched a few different directions, and perhaps I need to take some of your advice there and focus more exclusively on what's bringing in the most money. And certainly people that are listening out there, I know people have the same problem. I hear this all the time, that people get distracted with the latest and greatest strategy or tactic, and perhaps if they actually did less, they'd see a little more revenue.
Maybe, but you can handle it, Spencer. That's the thing. You have multiple projects, but I think stretched thin doesn't really describe it, because you put time and effort into each one of them, and you have help from guys like Perrin who can help you out. But I think if you're just doing it solo, I like the focus for a more mental thing, that you just focus on one thing. And even bigger businesses, they have huge focus. Like Facebook, when they first started, their focus was to get 1 million users. If you see the social network at the last scene, that's what's happening. And that company, how many things do they have to juggle? How many opportunities came across their desk every day? But they really focused on that, not even one project, one metric of one project, which was to get 1 million visitors. So I do think the focus is nice, but the nice thing about the multiple projects is that you learn more from having your toes dip into a couple different things that you can use for other parts of your business. And I'm actually doing that a little bit now. So, yeah. So I think it does help.
No, it does. And I guess it's a balance, right? It's good to be involved in other things to learn. But you don't want to, again, be stretched too thin as well. So people can hopefully apply that in their own business. Now, also just to clarify, now that you're focusing on Backlinko, how are you actually bringing in revenue into the business? I have some ideas, but maybe I'll let you tell people how Backlinko is actually bringing in money in the door.
That's a great question. So I sell premium training products, specifically one course called SEO That Works. And that's 100% of the revenue from Backlinko. Okay.
And I know you launched it, I think, 2 or 3 months ago, and it's now currently closed. How often do you plan on opening that up for sale?
Yeah, this year I'm looking to open it 3 times.
Okay.
So probably early in the year, then another one in the spring and summer, and then another time in the fall.
Okay. Very good. It's good to know sort of the business model behind the blog, why you're actually producing all this content.
Right.
I mean, it's great to produce great content and get a lot of traffic, but at the end of the day, the business has to make money some way. And I don't know if you're willing to share any type of revenue numbers, or maybe you can tell us how much the course costs. Any other details you're willing to share there?
Sure. Well, it's funny you mentioned the monetization thing, because you'd be surprised how many emails I get, maybe 1 or 2 a month, from people who are just like, wow, thank you for creating, because I don't have the course for sale. So there's nothing to buy on the site. Mm-hmm. So people are like, wow, like it's amazing that you created the site like for free and just to provide value. So people think it's kind of like a charity. And it's like, no, if I was going to start a charity, I would probably help people in Cambodia, not people with their niche sites.
Right.
It's not really a charity. Like Backlinko is definitely a business.
Yep.
But to your point of numbers, I'd rather not give specific numbers, but I'll just say that each launch so far has made 6 figures in revenue, and I've had several.
That's fantastic.
This year.
Yeah.
So it gives some perspective on
Yep.
on the numbers. And the course is on the higher end. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's the great thing about having a higher priced product, it's not great for everyone. It doesn't work all the time, because the Longtail Pro is quite affordable. Is that you don't need as many customers. So, I think for me, like if I had, for example, 100 customers in a launch, it's closing to 6 figures already.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of like the price high and justify model that Tim Ferriss talks about. But for certain products, it makes less sense. You know what I mean? I think it's mostly like an info products or consulting or services. That's you can go for higher end. For a SaaS product or software like Zippy Courses and Longtail Pro, I think it's a balance. You don't want it too cheap. Pricing's always tricky, but I'm just saying for information products and the revenue for me, I prefer the higher end.
Yep, that makes sense. Now, is your course, is it like a go through the course at your own pace type of thing, or is it something where you're actually involved doing coaching and webinars, where you have ongoing involvement? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's a combination of both. So all the course materials, is a step-by-step process of how to rank a page or a site, is all recorded. So that's a total go at your own pace, lifetime access deal. In addition to that, there's some support in the sense of Q&A sessions. So there's, depending on what kind of package you choose, there's different Q&A sessions that you get access to. And that's where I'm live on a webinar answering questions about the course or about whatever people want to know. And then there's also email support, and any sort of material question I answer personally. And then there's a Facebook group, which is one of the coolest things in the course. I didn't have it there originally, but people kept asking me to include one, so I decided to do it. And it's great. It's basically, people love asking questions in the group because you get much better answers than if you ask me. Because who would you rather ask, me or 350 people? Or 400 people in the group. So obviously you're going to get a lot, sometimes really amazing answers from the group. So there's also those elements to help people not only answer questions, but get more value and get more out of the course.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think people are probably curious how you're doing your course and what's working for you. So thanks for the insight there.
Yeah.
I do want to move on now to what will probably be the bulk, at least the bulk of my questions that I have is, when I read your blog, the content is exceptional. You're a great writer. The content is very in-depth and useful. And one of the things, the first thing that I'd like to ask about is every time I read one of your titles, it's so captivating. You seem to have a way with writing the titles that makes people want to read that content. How do you have some sort of secret formula that you're using to create these interesting blog post titles?
I kind of wish I did. I would just use it over and over again.
Right.
But I think one thing that's helped me, like a little actionable takeaway tip, is that for every post, I have a keyword that I want to target. No surprise probably there. And what I like to do is if the keyword makes sense for that title, front load the keyword in the title. So then the rest, you can just bang out some specific level of value that they're going to get from the post or a description. So for example, one of the posts, the keyword I'm targeting is viral marketing. So I laid out the title as viral marketing case study, and then the description. I think it's how one vlogger got 17,500 something visits in one day. So I like to kind of set up the keyword in the beginning, and then people, then they're like viral marketing case study. I kind of like to put also some catchy words in the beginning, like case study, to really, that's a standout sort of thing, because very few people are publishing case studies, so I don't want to save that for the end. A lot of times people put case study at the very end. So if you have some value, like a step-by-step plan, or it's a downloadable thing, or it's a video case study, you want to put that somewhere towards the beginning, because then people will read it and they'll want to read the rest of your headline, and that's where you can get really specific. So I guess that would be my actionable thing. Put the keyword in the beginning if it makes sense, and then put some, or whatever makes your post really unique, and then add some specifics after that.
Yeah, and it always seems like in your titles you're using some sort of numbers, whether that's a % increase or number of subscribers or some sort of stat that seems to maybe catch people's eye a little bit as well when you do that.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with that. There's a lot of actually, if you want some cool research for the show notes, Outbrain, who runs this sort of content discovery service. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Yeah, I have heard about Brain.
Okay. Yeah, they're kind of like, sometimes if you're on ESPN and you go to the bottom of an article, they'll have links to like weird stuff, right? That's Outbrain.
Yep.
And that's the way it's kind of a way to get eyeballs on your content. And they have great data about what people click on. And they had some great studies about numbers. They had another one about whether you use negative words, get more headlines. So like, 5 worst foods for belly fat will get better clicks than 5 best foods for belly fat. So I like to kind of read this stuff. There's a lot of great data about headlines, and it's out there. There's another great one by on OKDork, which is BuzzSumo and OKDork. We analyzed 100 million headlines, and here's what we found. And it's some great insights behind all these headlines that they have in their database.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a great article, it starts with that blog title. But then, of course, you need to live up to that promise. And when I read your content, like I said, it's really good. You provide that in-depth content. And I'm sure, and I'll let you say whether or not that's true, but I'm sure that the in-depth content is a huge reason why your blog has been so successful. People, they read the blog posts, they're able to take actionable steps, and that makes them want to share that. So how can people that have their own blog sort of up their game in terms of creating exceptional content like you're doing there?
Well, one recommendation, like you said yourself, Spencer, the idea is that you want it to be in depth. So I feel like a huge mistake I see people make with their content when it comes to a blog is that they only skim the surface of the topic. So what I like to do, a good rule of thumb I use, is an inch wide and a mile deep. So for every topic I cover, it's an inch wide, and then I go a mile deep on that topic. And I find that provides so much more value to people than broadly covering a topic. Because if you want the broad level of 5 ways to get more subscribers or the importance of email marketing, you can find that. But if you want to find how to create a form that's specifically for collecting emails that will get more subscribers, like how long should the form be, where should it be positioned on the page, what copy should you use around it, what call to action should you have in your button, what color should the button be, how big should the button be, what shape should it be. Now we're talking about a super in-depth, inch-wide, mile-deep post. It's going to provide a lot more value than if you said include one of the tips as part of a 5 tips to get more subscribers style blog post.
Yep, I agree. And one of the things that I notice when I read other people's blogs, and I'm sure that people listening to this podcast that have their own websites, their own blogs, they're thinking, I'm not an expert in everything yet. There's only so much content that they can perhaps write from their own personal experience. And as I read Backlinko, for example, I think it's your latest post, you wrote about conversion rate optimization techniques. And you had this huge list of something like 100 plus conversion rate optimization techniques. I'm guessing that you haven't practiced all 100 of those. And my point just being, is it okay to write content even though you may not be the expert in every area? And how do you get around that?
Absolutely. That's a great point. You definitely don't have to be an expert, and that's a great example of, obviously, I haven't there's 100 techniques. There's just no possible way that I tried them, and it doesn't mean that it isn't warranted to include that in your content. So I feel like whenever possible, you should use personal experience, right? That's like, but you don't have to be an expert. If you look at Smart Passive Income, for example, when Pat first started that blog, he was far from an expert in terms of marketing, right? Now he's obviously a brilliant marketer and a guy I look up to and respect for marketing advice. But he basically just documented his journey, that he came from a guy who was just trying to learn the ropes of this whole marketing thing that he had from his leads course. And now he's very knowledgeable. So I think that you don't have to be an expert as long as you document your journey along the way and use that inch wide a mile deep mindset. And I feel like if you use the inch wide a mile deep mindset, it's hard to run out of topics to cover. You very rarely have to dip into areas that you don't know about, because when you look at something like email marketing alone, if you're only going to cover the surface, then there's not that much there. But when you look at forms and buttons and call to actions and where to place it on your site, what incentives to give, what copy to use, what kind of squeeze pages to use, then you're talking about right there with that one subtopic of marketing, email marketing, you have a ton. Or even within like fitness or weight loss. I mean, if you want to cover like 5 tips for growing muscle, you'll run out of things to talk about really quickly. But if you're just talking about how to grow your biceps, and you go an inch wide, a mile deep about different types of curls, different bars to use, different weights, different types of how many sets do you use. You know what I'm saying? Like you can go into just that biceps, you can do 10 posts based on that. So I feel like that when you use this inch wide, a mile deep, all of a sudden you have a lot more to write about, because people crave the depth. That's what they want, because that's what's lacking online, to be honest, when it comes to content, is depth. So if you can provide that, you actually very rarely have to dip into things that you don't know about or can't source firsthand from another source, which is also totally fine. That's what I did with this conversion guide.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point, and hopefully is encouraging to people. I sort of meant that question to be encouraging for people that maybe think they're not an expert in everything. There's ways like you just described right there, sort of the inch wide, mile deep, and sourcing other firsthand information is a great way that you can provide lots of valuable content. I've done, of course, the same on my blog. I can think of a related example, I guess. I did a blog post on how to create a shopping comparison chart, because that's something I did on my niche sites, and I had a huge, tutorial videos and how-to guide, just how to create a shopping comparison chart, and that's been a very popular blog post for me. And so now you mentioned earlier on that you haven't written a lot of content as far as number of posts this year, something like 11 blog posts. How much time are you actually spending writing those posts then?
That's a good question, because another question that I get a lot from people is, what do you do all day? Because, if you go to the blog and you go next week, there's not going to be another post. Then you go next week, sometimes there's not another post. Then sometimes even if you go another week, there's nothing.
Right.
So it's, a lot of people assume that I'm sitting around playing Grand Theft Auto in my underwear. And some days, to be honest, I am. So
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
So once in a while, if you said, you must have played GTA all day, they'll actually be spot on. But there's actually a lot of work behind the scenes that goes into creating the type of inch wide, mile deep content that I just spoke of. So I would say, depending on the post, it's a good 20 hours for each post. Mm-hmm. I've been able to cut that down a little bit lately just because of process, just from practice. And sometimes when I feature a reader, a lot of the material for the blog post is done for me. So they did all the work basically to get the results, and they just hand me the results, and it's my job to tell a story with it and to make it from this guy did this to this guy did this, and here's how I can do the same thing, which is a lot of work, but it's slightly less than just from total scratch writing a post. So I'd say about 20 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a significant amount of time. I mean, that's clearly, I'm going to venture to guess that's much more time than most people are spending on their blog posts, but the results are pretty clear, at least in your example, for what that's done for your business. I also kind of feel like I need to ask, where you're coming up with your blog post ideas. I mean, I know you touched on that a little bit about certain topics that you can just go really in depth from your personal experience. You're sharing some customer case studies or experiences that they're having as well. But do you have some sort of overall general strategy for finding new content to write about?
I do, actually. So I use a keyword-focused model. So for me, keywords are just gold. Even if there was no such thing as SEO, I would still be very, very focused on keyword research. Because keyword research basically tells you, that what people are searching for, in what volume, if it's more or less people are searching for it than last year, how much someone searching for that keyword is worth in terms of a click, because you can look at that data using Longtail Pro or the keyword planner. So from that data alone, you just get awesome information. So forget SEO for a second. That's where I go, because it's kind of like a focus group. Basically, you can see what people are interested in. So
right.
I look at keyword research first. So excuse me. If I come up with a topic that I think is great, but I really can't find a keyword to fit it around, that gives me a clue that there's probably no one interested, or very few people interested in that topic. So I shelve it. On the other hand, a lot of times I'll come across a keyword that has, decent search volume, the competition is on the lower side, and it seems to be trending in the right direction. Then I'll say, okay, how can I create the best result in Google for this keyword? So a lot of times I look at the top 10 or the top 20 in Google for that keyword, and sometimes that inspires me and say, oh, okay, this guide, is pretty solid. I'll create something similar. Or sometimes it's just like, what, this top, this first page is weak, and I can create something that blows everything out of the water. So my goal with every keyword-focused post is pretty much to create the best guide in the internet so that it deserves to rank number one. So that's kind of how I go about it. It's very keyword research focused, which I'm sure you're happy to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, I'm happy to hear that. But I mean, that makes sense as well. To dig a little bit deeper, do you have some sort of search volume that you're unwilling to write about if it's too low or too high? What's the range of sort of keyword search volume that you typically look for?
Well, for me, I go pretty low, actually. I like it depends on the cost per click and where it's trending. So I've found that because recently I've been writing about conversions, and that's been sort of eye-opening, because it's the first time I've been in a niche that is growing really fast. So before that, the niche authority site that I spoke to earlier was also in an older niche. Had nothing to do with internet marketing, but just it was an older space. So the keyword volume was pretty accurate. If it said that 5,400 people search for it a month, it was pretty much that. And it's the same story with a lot of the SEO keywords, just because they've been around so long. People have been searching for link building for 15 years, so the search volume's there. But for some keywords, I noticed if they're a little bit on the newer side, if people are just searching for them recently, the search volume I found is misleading, so I'm a little bit more liberal. So for example, one of the keywords I'm targeting is increased conversions. So that keyword, I think on the surface has like 200 searches a month with Google Keyword Planner. But my gut tells me that that's not super accurate. Plus the cost per click is a little bit high. Mm-hmm. So if it's a keyword like that, I take it with a grain of salt. If it's a keyword that I'm pretty sure is consistent, people have been searching for it for a long time, so Google has some good data on it, that's where I'll go. I'll do like 500 or sometimes 1,000 or maybe 600 would be the lowest I'd go. But I don't like to have some number that's like too high, because I feel like that blocks you from a lot of great keywords that customers are searching for. Because with keyword research, as you know, you also have to use your brain and be like, is this a keyword a customer is actually going to search for? Because if it has, 800 searches a month, or let's say 1,000 searches a month, the cost per click is $10 in the low competition. That's nice. But what are you going to do with that person when they get to your site? So that's also a factor. If it's a great fit for someone searching that will ultimately be a good candidate for one of my premium training products, that's also a variable I throw in there. So for me, keyword research is like 1,000 different variables. Search volume is one, and actually one of the least important.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and that's good tips. I think that is probably some similar guidelines that people should be following for their own site, because they're going to have different goals and different things they're trying to achieve with their content. And so being keyword focused is important, but yeah, like you said, search volume may or may not be super important as one of those factors. It kind of depends. So let's move on now to what is perhaps it's certainly one of the most important things when after you have produced a great piece of content, you need to spend some time promoting that. Can you give us an idea? How much time do you spend promoting your content right now? After you produce a blog post, about how much time do you put into making sure the word gets out?
I'd say it's another 10 hours.
Yeah.
On top of that.
So what are your steps to promote that?
So I'm a big email promotion guy. I've kind of tried everything in terms of content promotion. I've tried Outbrain. I've tried Twitter ads. I've tried Facebook ads. I've tried everything. But for me, the best ROI is email. The only problem with email is that just unless you're going to spam people, it's super time consuming. So what I like to do with email is I bring my content, what I call a content roadshow. And basically a content roadshow is based on the idea of what people used to do in the movie industry in the 20s and 30s before everyone had radio and TV in their house. What they would do is when a new movie came out, like a big budget film, they couldn't run radio ads and TV ads to get the word out for people in like the middle of Kansas or Ohio. So they could only really get in front of the people in the major cities with billboards. So what they would do is they'd actually have showings of the movie in different big cities around the states. So in like New York and Chicago and LA, Dallas, they would show the movie there. And they'd bring their little movie on a road show. And then when it actually got released to the country, word of mouth would have spread via old school telephone and word of mouth and mail and stuff like that. So I take the same approach with my content. I bring it on a little roadshow to people that would be interested in it and kind of let them do what they want with the content. Sometimes they share it, sometimes they don't. I don't ask them to ever do anything. I just show it to them. So how I determine who would be interested in seeing it is I usually just Google keywords that are related to my content and see what comes up. So these aren't usually like super direct competitors, but people who at least write about once in a while something that this content is about, and then get it in front of them. So if I was publishing about something about keyword research, you'd obviously be like a person that I'd reach out to in a non-spammy way. I'd just be like, hey, Spencer, you're obviously like a huge keyword research guy, very knowledgeable about the topic. I just created this guide to keyword research. Do you want to check it out? A lot of times I don't even send the link in the first email. Just ask if they want to see it.
Right.
That way, if they don't have to do anything. They can just not reply. And then if you said, yeah, sure, I'd say, here you go, Spencer. Would love to hear what you think. And it's deceptively simple because it actually works super well, because what you're doing is you're putting your high quality content in front of people who are interested in that topic and have the power to share it with their audience. So it's actually a huge win-win, because a lot of times when you use this content roadshow strategy, you'll find that people reply and actually thank you. A lot of people are reluctant to do it until they start getting their first few thank yous. Because imagine, if you're interested in like the Civil War, for example, some people are super fascinated by Civil War. My dad loves Civil War stuff. And if I, sent him an email, I was like, Dad, I just read this awesome article about Gettysburg. You should read it. He will thank me for sending it. And it's the same exact philosophy with whatever you just published. As long as it's up to snuff and you're getting in front of people who are legitimately interested in that topic, they're going to thank you and they're going to share it with their audience, which is great traffic for you.
So, you kind of mentioned there at the end of the email, you're simply asking them, what do you think? Do you ever go a step beyond that and specifically ask, will you share this on Facebook or Twitter, or will you link to this or whatever?
Never.
Never?
No, I just think it's not good form, and I don't think it works. I think it can backfire more times. Like for every one person who's kind of on the fence about sharing and that call to action gets them to share, there's two or three that are just like, oh, I thought he was just sending me something. Now he just wants me to share it. I think also it depends what niche you're in, but if you're in the marketing space, people aren't stupid. And
right.
Everyone knows that you're sending it to them, so then hopefully they'll like it and share it. And you don't have to explicitly say it. If you're in kind of a different niche that maybe isn't as sophisticated with marketing strategies, it may make more sense to be more direct. But it's something you can kind of test the waters with people and see how they react. If you're maybe in like the mommy blogging space where people maybe you actually have to say, I'd really love it if you can share it on Facebook, or maybe ask for their feedback. And then if they say it's great, then use the call to action.
Right.
But I kind of I don't know, something about it, man. I think for link building, ironically, I'm more direct because I feel like there's less implicit underpinning of what's actually going on. And there it makes more sense to be direct. But with social sharing, I just kind of like to get it in front of people.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and good tips, I think. So when you're doing this content roadshow, how many people do you usually contact to get your content out there?
About 100 to 150.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, that's quite a few emails.
Yeah, well, it's a numbers game. That's
Right.
the thing. Like, I make it sound like you send an email and everyone's going to be delighted and you're going to make their day.
Right.
I wish it was that easy. But it's sort of a numbers game, and you just got to email a ton of people. And the nice thing is it's super easy to outsource. So I have my assistant set up the emails, and then I send them myself to make sure they're not emailing someone like you, who we're having a podcast interview today. It'd be a little bit weird if right after this podcast you got some email about a blog post I published. Right. It doesn't make sense. So, and also it's people you know, and so I just like to have that little safeguard. So I have the assistant kind of line them up, and then I bang them out by just clicking send in Gmail. It doesn't take that long.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do want to email. I mean, you don't have to email that many people. That's a lot. But I think if you email like 50 or even 40, you'll notice a huge difference in the number of shares that you get from everything that you publish.
And so do you use that strategy mostly just to get, social shares, or do you see a lot of residual, either links from mentions on blogs? What sort of results do you usually see when you do something like that?
That's a good question. So once in a while, you'll get a link straight up from the strategy. So just recently, I used the same strategy with the last guide that I published, a conversion guide that you mentioned before. And I don't remember who it was, but he has a pretty authoritative site, maybe the Domain Authority 45 or something. It's pretty solid. Anyway, he tweeted out to his followers, and I was very thankful for that. And then a few days later, I noticed that he did a roundup post about the post of the month or the post of the week, and that was in there. So I got a link. And I can guarantee I wouldn't have gotten that link if I didn't directly show it to him. So you can get links from the strategy. The other nice thing about this strategy is that you're creating mind share with influencers. So all these influencers are kind of like, you go from no one knowing who you are to someone who's producing really good stuff. So in the future, when they do publish a post about your topic, they're going to think, if they're thinking of something to mention, you're going to be top of mind because they just saw your thing and it made a very strong impact because you personally sent it to them, as opposed to them seeing it from Twitter, which is very impersonal, easy to forget. So I think I wouldn't go in expecting to get a lot of links from it, but you will get a few links from it. It's really just to get the sort of buzz and eyeballs, and then when you get a lot of eyeballs, you do get links from that, and that's the ultimate goal, is to get links.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So let's go ahead and talk specifically about link building a little bit more. Besides just the content roadshow that you're doing for your content, are you doing some other activities specific to each piece of content that you produce that you hope is going to generate links?
I do, yeah. So I have a couple strategies that I use quite a bit. One is that I've had a lot of success with lately, and a lot of readers have success with lately. It's called the moving man method. And it's sort of a twist on broken link building. And broken link building is basically where you find broken links on another person's website, you point them out, and that's your way to get the foot in the door with that person. And also, if you have a nice replacement for that broken link and you let them know that they have a broken link and you have something that's very similar, it's kind of a no-brainer for them to add your link to their site. And it's a strategy that works tremendously well. But moving man method is a little bit different because you're not really looking for broken links. So when the flaw in broken link building is that to find these broken links, you have to use tools that basically scrape the sites and look for links that are returning 404 pages, which can a lot of times land you some great links. But sometimes the pages are broken, but they're not showing a 404. So for example, someone's domain expires and they stop paying for their hosting, and Bluehost has a thing on there that says, this page is hosted by Bluehost or whatever. That is a live page, so it's not a 404, yet the site isn't working. So all the links to it are sending people to this Bluehost page, which obviously isn't what people want. So you can use the same approach. So you reach out to these people and say, hey, I noticed you had a link to whatever article. As you can see, now it's showing some Bluehost page. I have something very similar. It might make a nice replacement for that article. You'd be surprised how well that strategy works, especially at scale.
What sort of tool are you using then to find those pages?
Well, for that, you can't use a tool. And that's almost the beauty of it, because with broken link building, there's almost been like a gold rush, very similar to how expired domains were very recently, that there was sort of a gold rush for broken links and expired domains and all that. And a lot of them have been discovered and shored up. But with this, it's wide open, because all you need is your head. You don't need any tools. So for example, when SEO Moz changed to Moz, I reached out to a bunch of people who are linking to SEO Moz. Now, of course, the domain redirected and it worked, but it's still referred to a site that the old name. So that was enough just to get my foot in the door, so then I could pitch my link, and that worked quite well. So I think that it's more about keeping your ear to the ground with your industry, and you'll see opportunities come up. You'll see tools that don't work anymore. You'll see blogs that are showing up weird because the person stopped updating WordPress, so the theme's all messed up. You'll find articles that are hopelessly out of date and refer to something that doesn't exist, like an old business, right? You'll find domains that are expired, or that the person didn't pay their hosting anymore, or that someone didn't redirect a page properly, so it's not showing a 404 page, but it says something like, this page moved to here, stuff like that. So it's more about, I wish there was more of like, here's exactly how to find these opportunities, but it's more about just looking for when something changes in your industry and being on top of that.
Yeah. No, definitely a little bit tougher to find because you have to do it somewhat manually. You mentioned having an assistant helping you doing other things. Is this something that your assistant also is involved in, or is this something you do, pretty much on your own?
Yeah, this is something that I do on my own. Okay. So it's something that you'll come across it almost by serendipity, and you'll be like, oh, here's a great opportunity. So for example, when I was researching this conversion guide, I noticed that people were referencing this site called abtest.com. Maybe it was abtesting.com, something like that. And when I clicked on the links to the case studies, they all redirected to the HubSpot homepage. So I guess HubSpot bought the site, but the case studies aren't there anymore. So that's a golden opportunity for the moving man method, right? Those links still work, but they're not really working in the sense that they should be. So that would be an opportunity, and that's something that's hard for an assistant. You can't just be like, go out there and find them. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that you'll come across. You'll see a press release, you'll see a news article that something shut down, like a restaurant if you're in a brick and mortar or another competing business. And then you go in there and you just get those links that they used to have.
Yep. No, that makes sense. So I want to talk about any other link building strategies that you have. I mean, you have these very cool named things, by the way, Content Roadshow, the Moving Man. I know you have your skyscraper technique that we didn't specifically talk about, but what other sort of link building strategies, whether they have a cool name or not, can people apply in their own business?
Well, they all have a cool name, so there aren't any to cover that are just not unnamed.
That's right. They have to have a name.
They have to have a cool name. Those names are actually harder to come up with than it seems, dude. I struggle with these names. It's like I wish I could just pay someone to just like a branding expert to come up with these names, because they take me forever.
No, anyway, they're very cool. They're very cool, and it draws a lot of attention to you. It's a good marketing tactic, when you sort of name the technique, of course everybody's going to refer to you, so it's very cool.
Yeah, it's been good link building. That's almost a link building strategy in and of itself, actually.
Right.
Because people tend to link to you when you have sort of names for your techniques. There's more nuances that go into it, but it does help, I think, because then it gives something tangible that people can talk about. So they won't always link to it, but at least they'll talk about it, rather than just like a vague kind of strategy. It has a name, so it has some legs to it. So another one, I mean, this is kind of a cool name. This is one of the names I'm not so pumped about, is Gestographics. Okay. But it's basically, infographics in general. I feel like they've sort of gone out of style, and I don't understand why, because they're great and they work great. And I think the reason I'm still kind of big on infographics is that a buddy of mine runs a huge infographic agency in the UK, and his clients are like the UN and Visa and stuff like that. And they're just crushing it with infographics in terms of traffic, in terms of links, in terms of SEO.
Wow.
Just a huge fan of infographics. I feel like people have sort of gotten away from them because people kind of started creating really crappy ones. And I think that maybe deterred people from using them. But yeah, I've had great success with infographics. So that's another strategy that I wouldn't consider dead. just yet.
I agree. We've actually, I guess we've only done one. We started a new authority site project, a new case study on my blog that Perrin and I have been, doing recently, and we built our first infographic, and it was pretty easy, to be honest, to get a nice few links.
Right.
So it's a strategy that definitely still works. I'm also trying to think of people just listening into the podcast that are just getting started. They don't have an audience. They don't really have any traffic per se. What other either marketing in general or link building techniques would you recommend for somebody, in that case? And certainly the things you've mentioned already can apply, but is there anything else that somebody that's brand new, I guess, if you will, without an audience, that they can implement?
Sure, yeah. So I think the first thing you want to do is, I've assumed you've already kind of identified a niche.
Mm-hmm.
From that point, it's a matter of positioning. So it's figuring out kind of why your blog exists. And this is a question a lot of people skip over because it's more fun to talk about the tactical stuff. Who you're going to email, what strategies you're going to use, what cool names you're going to give the things that you create. But the most important thing is actually step one is positioning. And you want to figure out how your blog is going to fit into or your site, it doesn't matter if it's a blog, is going to fit into what's already out there. So for me, when I was first starting out with SEO, Niche Pursuits was huge for me. I used to read it all the time. And the positioning was that it was super case study focused, with a lot of really actionable stuff for keyword research, creating niche sites, and link building. I mean, at one point, Spencer, I remember you had your entire link building step-by-step plan laid out in a blog post. So who else was doing that? Nobody. So Spencer and Niche Pursuits had great positioning in the SEO space, which is really crowded, and you were able to build it, Spencer, into like a huge successful blog. And a lot of the reason for that was that you didn't just create content willy-nilly, and you specifically said, this is a site about niche sites. That's what we're going to cover. That's why we're different, and we're going to cover it in a different way because we're going to show you exactly how to do it because I have nothing to hide, and I'm going to show you exactly how I do it and have had success with it. And you showed numbers behind, everything, all the traffic they were getting and all that stuff. So I feel like that's great positioning. Another is Steve Kamb from Nerd Fitness.
Right. So
Nerd Fitness is like the opposite of your typical fitness site. All these fitness sites for men are like, you need to have you need to shoot bull testicles into your blood, and you need to lift, massive amounts of weight so you puke. And right. Steve was like, you know what? Well, we're going to take an analytical approach to lifting weights and being fit, and do it from the perspective of a nerd. So his positioning was that he didn't appeal to that whole muscle-bound, crazy guy crowd. He was the guy who was like, you like Star Wars and lifting? This is for you. And that was his positioning, and it worked great. The name was also perfect for what he was doing. Another example would be like marksdailyapple.com, also in the nutrition space. He writes about paleo diet stuff. And his thing is like, I just write about the primal nutrition, which is his kind of paleo diet twist. And that's all he does. And that's his thing. He's not about health, not about general fitness, not about general nutrition. His positioning is that he writes about how you should eat based on the idea that we should eat like cavemen, basically. So yeah, I think that's kind of a great first step, because a lot of times the sobering experience for someone when they create a blog, think it's going to be a huge hit, and realize that there's no room for that blog in the space, especially because there's just so many blogs now. It's really hard to stand out. So I feel like if you have this positioning, you can go in there and be like, here's why I'm different, and here's why you need me, and you'll do a lot better, especially if you use the strategies. But you'll do a lot better than if you're just like, if someone asked you what's your site about, and you just said, I have a fitness blog, But if you say, oh, I'm a fitness blog for busy moms, now you're talking. That's in positioning right there.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Great advice. I 100% agree. I think people do need to be thinking about that, their marketing angle, if you will, out of the box, the branding that they're going to have. And all of those things really are critical to creating a successful blog, because there's so many websites out there. And if you're not doing something slightly different or better, you're not going to stand out. And so important words of wisdom there. Now, I think we pretty much covered all of my questions that I specifically had. But was there anything that maybe I didn't ask about that I should have, as far as, link building or content production? Any sort of last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with us?
I guess based on a lot of questions that I get, the one thing that would be most helpful to people is really don't worry so much about how often you publish. People care a lot less than you think. Like, you'd be surprised how few people look every day to check if you updated, or lose sleep over the fact that you haven't updated your blog. I think if you can keep up the quality, publish as often as you can. If I could publish every week, I would, because I think it's better for traffic and it's nice for people to have good stuff to read all the time. And Niche Pursuits obviously updates quite often, but you have basically help that is able to get the job done. And you don't take a post off. Every one is really good. So if you can do that, then by all means do it. But if you feel like you're publishing just for the sake of publishing, that's a time to reflect and pause and say, maybe, I don't need to publish this week, and the world isn't going to stop spinning because I don't, and my rankings aren't going to drop because I stopped publishing. So yeah, I think that's a nice piece of advice, something I wish someone told me when I was starting my blog. Yeah, no, that is really good. I mean, you hear so often that or people advise that, stick to a publishing schedule, pick once a week or pick twice a week or whatever that is and stick to it. But I think you're right. I mean, I see that in my own blog. I do stick to a fairly regular schedule. It's not perfect, of course. And a lot of times I do. I feel the pressure to get a blog post out there because, hey, readers are waiting and listening. But I probably overthink that myself for my own blog, and certainly people out there. So I think that's great advice. And you're an example of somebody that's not publishing every week or even every other week. And your traffic is growing, your audience is growing, your reach is expanding. And so it's certainly a strategy and technique that can work. So, but overall, Brian, I just want to thank you for coming on the Niche Pursuits podcast. It's been a pleasure. No problem, man. It's been great to be here. And like I was telling you before we got on, that I've been a reader for a long time, so it's pretty wild for me to be on the podcast. No, that's awesome. So it's really cool. It's definitely like a I made it moment. Yeah, no, that's great. No, and I appreciate you coming on. It's great to talk to people in the same industry and swap strategies. So that's very cool. Is there any other place outside of backlinko.com that you'd like to send people or where they can follow along with you? Yeah, definitely head to backlinko.com and sign up for the newsletter, because that's where I give a lot of really exclusive strategies and tips that I don't share on the blog. So that would be the best place to head. Hey, that sounds great. Thanks again. Appreciate it, Brian. We'll see you. Sure, no problem. Thanks for having me.